Members, it's time to start again. Mr. Chen Chi-chin. Thank you. In accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as the funding application for the study on the topside development and engineering, planning and architectural study, the administration would look at the capacity of infrastructure. And since over the years the government has overestimated the capacity of many infrastructure facilities so that they are overloaded soon after commissioning, this committee asked the government to, before awarding the consultancy contract on the Hong Kong boundary crossing facility topside development and the planning, engineering and architectural study, there should be a proper assessment of the consultancy studies conducted previously, or engage consultants which have not made any wrong assessment in the past to ensure the capacity would be right. Voting is now closed. The result displayed 6 for, 13 against, no abstention. The motion is negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chin, in accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as the funding proposal for the planning, engineering, architectural study for the topside development of the boundary crossing facility islands, the government would look at the development of bridgehead economy, as many people are worried that it will become a location for parallel traders to distribute their goods and attract a lot of such great parallel goods traders to the boundary crossing facility and causing nuisance to North Lantau residents. This committee requests the government to look at measures on preventing the facility from becoming an attraction for the parallel goods traders. Voting begins. Before I declare the result, please check your votes. Voting is now closed and the result displayed 6 for, 17 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chin, in accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as in the proposed planning, engineering and architectural study in relation to the Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities island, the administration has said that it would cover the development of bridgehead economy, as many Tung Chung residents are concerned that this would attract many tourists from the mainland to spend money there and lead to escalation of shop rentals in Tung Chung, and small shops would not be able to survive. This committee urges the government in awarding the consultancy contracts would look at the rental implications of arising from the development of bridgehead economy, and also to take measures to prevent rental from escalating in Tung Chung. And I'll put this to vote. The voting is now closed. Please check your votes. 8 for, 19 against. The motion is negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chin, in accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as in the planning, engineering, architectural studies on the development of economic activities at the Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities island of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, it will look into the feasibility of using the topside and underground space for different economic activities. But many citizens are of the view that we should develop the island into a big container truck car park, so as to reduce such car parks in the urban area and to increase land supply in the urban area. This committee requests that the government should look into the possibility of developing the island into a big container truck car park, so as to release land in the urban area and increase land supply there. Voting begins now. Before I declare the result, please check your votes. Voting is now closed. And the result displayed 7 for, 21 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chin, in accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as in the planning, engineering, architectural study in relation to the Hong Kong boundary crossing facility island of Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge. The government indicates that it would look into the development of bridgehead economy as the location is close to the flight path of aircraft from Chelap Kok Airport. Many people are concerned about the noise implication and also the nuisance caused to citizens who go there to shop. And Hong Kong's international image, the committee urges to set up a task force to look into the environmental and other nuisance implications for developing the bridgehead economy there. Voting begins. Before I announce the result, please check your votes. Voting is closed and the result displayed. 5 for, 22 against. I declare the motions negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chun, in accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as in the planning, engineering, architectural study of the Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities island of Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge, the administration will look into the feasibility of different economic activities. And since many people are of the view that the island should not be used to develop catering and recreational uses, so as not to attract more mainlanders to Hong Kong, this committee urges the government to when deciding on the development proposals, not to cover the feasibility of providing the catering and recreational facilities there, so as not to attract more mainlanders to come to Hong Kong to spend money and lead to the deterioration of the standard of living in Tung Chung and Hong Kong. Please verify your votes before I close the voting process. 6 for, 22 against. The motion is negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chun, in accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as in the planning, engineering, architectural study at the Hong Kong boundary crossing facility island, the government will spend only $3.2 million on social community involvement and other miscellaneous items. Many people doubt that the government is not sincere to consult the people of Hong Kong over the proposed topside development. This committee requests the government to spend at least $10 million on consulting the community so that the consultant would have the sufficient resources to consult the people of Hong Kong over the planning proposals. And then there will be opportunities for people to express their views. Voting begins. Before I announce the results, please check your votes. Voting is now closed and the result is displayed. 6 for, 23 against. The motion is negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chun, this is the 15th, and we have 10 more to go. So for those who want to vote against the item, please come back now. In accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as in this planning, engineering, architectural study of the Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities islands, only $3.2 million is going to be spent on community involvement and other associated activities. Many people doubt that the government is not sincere about the consultation. This committee asks the government to consult the people of Hong Kong for a period of not less than 12 months so that people can express views on the proposed planning. Well, even we have completed all the motions on 37A. We are going to allow only 1 minute for the division, so please come back before 6:30 for the item. The voting is closed and the result displayed 6 for, 23 against. The motion is negative. Mr. Chen Chi-chun, in accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as in the past 2 FC meetings, the administration failed to give a specific replies to many questions on the proposed topside development and also the planning, engineering, and architectural study. This committee requests the government to retract this application so before the clear answers are given to members' questions, so that we can make a clear decision and correct decision on this item.
Voting begins. Before I announce the result, please check your votes. Voting stops. The result is displayed. 6 for, 22 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, in accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, I move that when it comes to the topside development of the BCF island of HZMB, the administration intends to build a columbarium there. Many Tung Chung residents are worried about this, and this committee asks that when the administration looks at the feasibility of building columbarium there, Tung Chung residents must be fully consulted, and only with the majority support of the residents can the columbarium be built. Voting begins. Before I announce the result, please check your votes. Voting stops. Result displayed. 5 for, 23 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, in accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, I move that when it comes to the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside developments and Hong Kong BCF Island of Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge, the administration says that other economic activities may be developed on the infrastructure and superstructure of the island. This committee asks the government to carry out a feasibility on the development of an eco-park there so as to increase the land for eco-industries and enhancing the recycling industry's operating environment. Voting begins. Before I announce the result, please check your votes. Voting stops. Result displayed. 5 for, 25 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, in accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, I move that for the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside development at Hong Kong BCF Island of the Hong Kong Zhuhai and Macau Bridge, the administration says that it would look at the feasibility of developing other economic activities there. However, many Hong Kong people think that the place should be made into an open space so people's living quality can be improved. This committee asked the administration to look at this feasibility, that is to provide open space on the artificial island so that Hong Kong people's living standard and quality can be enhanced. Voting starts. Before I announce the results, please check your votes. Voting stops. Results displayed. 5 for, 24 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, in accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, I move that for the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside development at Hong Kong BCF Island of the HZMB, the government says that it will look at the feasibility of carrying out different types of economic activities there. However, many Hong Kong people think that major leisure activities, such as the Hong Kong Stadium, should be moved to the BCF so as to increase the land supply in the urban areas. This committee asked the government to do accordingly so that more land in the urban area can be vacated. Well, there are still 5 more motions that I will move, so I would urge the members who want to veto the motion come back to the conference room as soon as possible. Let us start voting. Before I announce the results, please check your votes. Voting stops. Result displayed. 5-4-23 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, in accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, I move that for the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside developments at Hong Kong BCF Island of HZMB, the administration states that it will be looking at the feasibility of developing all sorts of economic activities on the island. The committee asked the government to also look at the feasibility of building an industrial park on the island so that the industrial land in Hong Kong can be increased and Hong Kong's industry can be revitalized. I urge the members to come back to the conference room as soon as possible. Voting starts. Before I announce the results, please check your votes. Voting stops. Results displayed. 7-4-28 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, in accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, I move that for the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside developments at Hong Kong BCF Island of HZMB, the administration states that it will be looking at the feasibility of having different economic activities on the island. However, many Hong Kong people are worried that this will attract more mainland residents who go to Tung Chung and the HZMB BCF area, and this will cause nuisance to the residents there. This committee asked the government to ensure that the mainland government will no longer allow more mainland travelers to come to Hong Kong, and only after doing that can the topside development study be carried out. There are still 3 more motions. Voting starts. Before I announce the results, please check your votes. Voting stops. Results displayed. 7-4-28 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, in accordance with paragraph 33A of the FC procedure, I move that for the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside developments at Hong Kong BCF Island of HZMB, the administration states that it will be looking at the feasibility of developing different economic activities on the island. This committee asked the administration to look into the possibility of constructing a large-scale recyclable energy facility there. And it should also look at the feasibility of having a wind field there or a solar energy field there so that the top side can be used efficiently. Well, I have said that we have to handle 2 more motions. Voting starts. Before I declare the results, please check your votes. Voting stops. Results displayed. 6-4-28 against. I declare the motion negative. Mr. Chen Shih-chung, second last one. In accordance with Rule 37A of the FC procedure, I move that for the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside developments in Hong Kong BCF Island of HZMB, the government says it will be looking at the feasibility of developing different economic activities on the island. This committee asked the government to look at the feasibility of developing flea markets on the island so as to create job opportunities for Tung Chung's grassroots residents. Voting starts. Before I announce the result, please check your votes. Voting stops. Result displayed. 11 for, 31 against. I declare the motion negative. The last motion. Mr. Chen Shih-chin, in accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, I move that for the planning, engineering, architectural study for topside development at Hong Kong BCF Island of HZMB, the government states that it will be looking at the feasibility of developing different sorts of economic activities on the island. However, many Hong Kong people think that the government should look at other possibilities. For example, moving military facilities such as the Tamar PLA headquarters in the urban area to the artificial island so that some urban land can be vacated. With this committee asked the government to do so that urban land sites can be vacated and land supply in the urban area can increase. Before I announce the voting results, please check your votes. Voting stops. This result displayed 13 for, 31 against. I declare the motion negative. Now I put FCR 2014-15-46A to the vote. For those who support who are in favor of the proposal, please raise their hands. There's a claim for division. The division bell will ring for 1 minute. Voting starts. Before I announce the results, please check your votes. Voting stops. Results displayed. 31 for, 17 against. I declare the proposal approved. Chairman, I have already announced the voting result. Please put this down in a record. I support the proposal. Items 2 and 3, FCR 2014-15, 39 and 48. Now we have 2 items. Colleagues, please keep quiet. Now we have 2 items, and they are related to the low-income working family allowance scheme. I suggest that we discuss the 2 papers at the same time, and then we will vote separately. The first paper is FCR 2014-15-39. Members are invited to approve the following proposals for taking forward the low-income working family allowance scheme. The supplementary provision of 52,471,000 in 2014-15 under subhead 000 operational expenses of head 141. The other paper is paper 48. Members are invited to approve a new commitment of $40,037,000 under Head 710 of the Capital Works Reserve Fund for the development of an information technology system and setting up of office automation facilities for implementing the low-income working family allowance scheme. The Labor and Welfare Bureau consulted the Poverty Alleviation Committee of the Legislative Council on this issue on the 27th of May 2014. 14. We have the following government officials attending this session. Mr. Matthew Cheung, Secretary for Labour and Welfare. Ms. Annie Tam, PS for Labour and Welfare. Mr. Donald Cheng, Deputy Secretary for Labour and Welfare. Ms. Jane Lee, PAS for Labour and Welfare. Ms. Winnie Lau, Senior Principal EO, Labour and Welfare Bureau. Mrs. Angelina Cheung Fong, Deputy Secretary for Education. Ms. Maple Lee, Assistant Commissioner for Labour. Ms. Maria Lau, Assistant Director of Social Welfare. Ms. Reddy Ng, Principal Economist, Economic Analysis and Business Facilitation Unit. Now I would like to invite Mr. Frederick Fung to report on the discussion of the Poverty Alleviation Committee. On the 27th of May 2014, our committee discussed the Low-Income Working Family Allowance Scheme and the relevant manpower and financial resources. We support such a proposal, but some members are concerned that for non-single parent applicants, they have to meet the requirement, that is working for 190 hours per month before they can get the basic allowance of $1,000. The committee hopes that these requirements can be relaxed, and also no pay sick leave should also be counted as work hours. Now, there are 4 members who would like to ask questions. Mr. Wong Yok Man, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Tan Kah Pil, Mr. Albert Ho, Dr. Fernando Cheung. First, Mr. Wong Yok Man. Thank you, Chairman. For the Low-Income Working Family Allowance, LIFA, last year we've already been talking a lot about it. CY Leung thought it's one of its major achievements. Once I asked the secretary, well, how come you are only paying those people after 1.5 years? Well, it was announced in last year's policy address. It said that there will be a LIFA. It's a great policy. And this year's the policy address repeats it again. Low-income working family allowance, they want $3 billion. So I think it's very easy to write the policy address. You just repeat the same thing every time. If you look at the policies, last year you already talked about this. This year you just add a few points and then you think it's a new policy. You are all bootlickers. Well, next year you will do the same thing. Today, if I approve your funding, actually after 1.5 years, well, only after 1.5 years can the people get the money. This is indeed not practical. You have always talking about being practical. When I look at your face, I get angry. 1.5 years. Why is it that you are only paying people after 1.5 years? Can those people tell me? The policy address has been repeating LIFA for 3 times. What a great policy address that is. Next year you will do the same thing. And you say that after we approve it and you get the money for LIFA, next year you will also include this in the policy address. Each year you get $3 million. And this is just 15% of a year's CSSA. At 1/1000th of the government's expenditure. But the government says that this will be a permanent initiative which will benefit a lot of people. I think you are really pretentious. This is disgusting. And you are always passing the buck to us. You say that we are filibustering. How come it takes 1.5 years for those people to get the money? Matthew Cheung, can you do it faster? Those families are dying. How are you alleviating poverty in this way? I think you are full of scrap. And you are saying that you have to look at the government's long-term financial commitment. So you must have targeted initiatives. Otherwise, people's desire to work may be hampered. That's why CY Leung is not providing subsidy to whole-day kindergartens. What have you been doing? You get such high pays. What How come you are not capable at all? You have been making wrong estimations in the past, and we have huge surplus. So paying people 3 billion is that great? Now you are not looking at the needs of the people in poverty, and you're wasting a lot of money on administration. You have to carry out means tests, you have to install computers, you have to hire more people, and for CSSA means tests you need a lot of administrative fees, and even for old age allowance, all kinds of allowance, you need administrative fee. I think your brain is damaged.
You're not doing anything with universal retirement protection, and yet you're spending more than $50 billion. Professor Chow was also there today. You shouldn't help CY Leung study universal retirement protection. So this professor was betrayed already by the government. So I think you all must be condemned, and you should go to hell, just like Cherry Lam and CY Leung. And why do you have to wait for a year and a half? Right now, they are talking about IT systems, and no money can be handed out until 1.5 years later. You're not giving any time for the administration. I will continue in the second round. So why? Tell me why you have to make people wait for 1.5 years. You should shorten the waiting time. Even if you to give out money, you don't have to wait for a year and a half. Mr. Wong Kok Heng, 5 minutes, please. Chairman, finally, we have reached this item. And this item is to provide allowance. It's on LIFA to aid the low-income working families. And years ago, we have raised this. The FTU have raised this recommendation, and we are thankful that the administration finally has taken our recommendation on board. However, after securing the funding, when the administration eventually offers the money to the needy families, I do agree that the waiting time is too long. If this application is approved, can the Secretary tell us that the dissipation of these allowances should be sped up? On the other hand, for the LIFA scheme, during our past discussions, we saw that we did have some comments on the working hour requirements. And since we are already at this stage today, I do hope that this application can be passed. Can the Secretary tell us when you will conduct a review to identify room for improvement or optimization for the LIFA scheme to help needy families? In Hong Kong, the children in low-income families, low-income working families, do require necessary allowance or assistance in order to narrow the poverty gap. Secretary, please. First of all, I'd like to explain the 1.5-year waiting time. We agree that we have to speed up the process. Our goal now is 15 to 18 months. So time is of paramount importance. 15 to 18 months. Mr. Wong Yok Man. Mr. Wong Yok Man, it's not the time for you to speak now. Mr. Wong Yok Man, please don't disrupt the meeting, or else I will ask you to leave. Chairman, please give me more time. We have a lot of administrative work, including, first of all, renting an office, this is necessary, and we also have to renovate the office. Second, we have to develop an IT system, and we also need to hire necessary hands. We are talking about more than 300 civil servants and more than 100 non-civil servants, in total 530 staff. It's a rather huge team, and we still have to confirm a lot of the details. So 15 to 18 months is rather stretch already. So we have to find a place, an office, as soon as possible, since we still have to do renovation. And we really would not lose any time in the process. And after a year or so, we will conduct a thorough review. And on the working hours requirement, and the requirement has been lowered from 208 to 192 hours. So there is some flexibility. So we should be pragmatic, and we should confirm the scheme as soon as possible, and so that we can conduct a review a year later. So by 1 year, is it starting from today or starting from the moment the allowance is given out? We have to. It's not from today, but from the day in which the plan comes into operation. I hope the Secretary and your team can shoulder the responsibility. You are always being attacked or stigmatized at the LegCo, and this is rather common. So, in my opinion, this is just a show. You should persist with your principles, and you should persist to serve the public. I think you should hold your own principles. Mr. Wong Yok Man. Mr. Wong Yok Man. Mr. Wong Yok Man, if you speak again, if you continue to interrupt, I have to ask you to leave the meeting. Mr. Wong Kok-heng, please continue. Thank you very much, Chairman, for your treatment. I think we have to persist with principles. So I hope all government officials and accountable officers have to continue to serve the public while upholding the right principles. Mr. Teng Ka-piu, I expect this proposal to be passed today. So I think this will be a relief to low-income working families. I think the waiting time of 15 to 18 months is still too long. Can you speed up the administrative process? If this proposal can be approved today, you can confirm with the Properties Management Office. You can confirm with the Government Properties Agency, and the 18-month preparatory period. During this period, can you come up with some relief measures for low-income working families? And in the policy address, we knew that full subsidy will be given under the Community Care Fund. Since we have a lot of money left, more than 3 billion, and for the WITS, can we increase the amount of allowance? The requirements are rather similar as LIFA. So my question is, under the Community Care Fund, are you sure that you are going to benefit all working families under the scheme? Have you missed any families or people? For instance, for instance, people who fall just under the poverty line. And second, for WITS, would you consider increasing the allowance for WITS? What can we do to shorten the waiting time? As the Chief Executive said in his policy address, we will explore under the CCF whether a special allowance can be given for non-CSSA students we are talking about 130,000 students receiving full allowance, and for LIFA, we expect around 200,000 families benefiting, and we have about 170,000 children who can benefit. And earlier, the Community Care Fund announced that the N-Nothing people, non-CSSA and non-PRH recipients would receive a one-off grant. 53,000 households will benefit, and each person, for one-person family, they will receive 4,000. For two, they will receive 8,000, and for 3 persons or more, they will receive more, even more. So these two specific measures will be able to provide relief to needy people and the grassroots families. Secretary, you said you would exclude low-income families living in PRH or those families without children. What I was referring to are exactly these people. We are conducting a review for WITS, and we have to consider very carefully. The income levels of different families are different. We are referring to families, not individuals. Only individuals would only be covered under WITS, and WITS will deal with individual applications. So this situation is a bit different. We hope the Community Care Fund can do something with the student allowance, because we are talking about more than 100,000 households who require help. Any follow-up from Mr. Tan Ka-Piu on the problem of the headquarters? So perhaps the Permanent Secretary can talk about the arrangements. Permanent Secretary. When planning for the LIFA scheme, all our teammates have worked very hard, and they are hoping to implement it as soon as possible. Some members felt that we are trying to procrastinate or delay the matter. I ask for your understanding, because we have to seek certain locations, but we cannot disclose such locations right now, because we are not able to disclose our locations to the GPA. Mr. Albert Ho. The LIFA scheme proposed by the administration is rather inadequate, but we would still support the scheme. As Mr. Frederick Fong, the SC leader, said, we'd like to stress that the requirement is 192 hours, and non-paid leave is not included. Non-paid leave are not included in the calculation of working hours. This is very harsh. Moreover, single-person households are being discriminated. They are already under hardship, and you're not going to take care of them because they don't have a family, so to speak. And for persons with disabilities and chronic illness patients, and you have to provide support to these families, in particular their carers. You should provide cash allowance. This is very unfair. I guess you are unwilling to do something, but we don't want to oppose this funding application. But you have to look at the issues I raised seriously. But we do want to voice out dissatisfaction. And for the waiting time of 15 to 18 months, as many members said, this is unacceptable, and this is way too long. If your system when will your system begin to accept applications? Would there be a backtrack period? Can you provide a backtrack period of, let's say, 8 months? And can these applications be dated back by 8 or 9 months, or even dated back to today when the application is passed? Of course, you have to. Of course, applicants still have to fulfill the criteria. Why can't we have a backdating periods? And this period should be as long as possible. Secretary, please. Perhaps I will talk about the operation of this scheme first. And when our thinking is that as soon as the system is in operation, we can accept applications. We are talking about more than 200,000 families. We cannot tackle them all together. We have to do it phase by phase. But when the system is in force, well, actually, the scheme is open for applications every 6 months. Of course, they have to provide the proof, for example, the pay slips. Assuming 15 months later, when the scheme is in force, we would have received applications since 6 months ago already. So we will actually receive applications 6 months before the system is in operation. So this is we hope this can help the applicants. So this is really the best we can do. We cannot realistically date back applications to today because we do have to adhere to financial discipline. This is not something our bureau can decide. We have to follow certain rules and constraints. But backdating the applications by 6 months is completely within our capability and completely reasonable. By financial discipline, you are talking about recurrent expenditure, right? But for the first application, the waiting time should not be so long. It should not be as long as 18 months. So the date back period for the first applications shouldn't be only 6 months. And in the future, you can follow the 6-month rule. But for the first application, you should provide a period more than 6 months. As I explained very clearly, our scheme has already provided enough flexibility, and allowance will be provided 6 months before the start of the scheme. Dr. Fernando Cheung. Chairman, we would certainly support the LEFA scheme for low-income working families. We raised suggestions such as the negative tax approach. First, the working hour requirements are way too high. 192 hours amounts to about 48 hours per hour, and you're asking, so in effect, you're asking them to work for 6 days, and it's the two-tier design is not necessary. We should adopt the lower limit for the working hours, as Mr. Frederick Fung said. We are concerned with we are concerned about the extra expenditure by these families and families with persons with disabilities, chronic patients, and senior and elderly. Right now, you are only looking at their income, and you are ignoring the expenditure. These families are more needed than other families. So, will you make such considerations for the transitional period? When are you going to come up with a transitional plan? And since approval is needed at the CCF, when will it be implemented, and when what will be the scope of coverage? You said you expect 200,000 low-income working families will benefit, which amounts to about 710,000 people. So can you address these questions? For the transitional arrangement, we will come back to the CCF panel under the Commission on Poverty. For the student allowance, we would ask them to consider this issue as soon as possible. If the one-off grant is approved, 138,000 grassroots students will benefit.
It's not directly related to the poverty line, but it's just equivalent to the requirement of 50% of median income. So 138,000 children will be benefited. And for the N nothing, that they are not on CSSA or they don't get PLH, then everyone would get 4,000 for those over 13,000 for a family with more than 3, and 53 grassroots families will be benefited. So we are not sitting on our hands in the interim. We are providing some relief, so that when this scheme is implemented, we start to receive application forms, and then we will be looking back for 6 months. We want to rationalize the arrangements and spare no time on the preparation. What about the elderly and the persons with disabilities? In this meetings of the subcommittee on poverty alleviation, chaired by Mr. Frederick Fung, we're saying that we will give the full allowance for one-person family is 72 hours. As for the other proposals, we will have to wait until we have the review after a year's time, and then we will try to see if there are any loopholes or shortfalls. We don't know what would happen, so we have to be objective about the whole thing. Well, for families with special needs, and you're not going to provide anything special additional, so I just don't see how after 1 year you are willing to do so, to help families with PWDs. Do you really have a plan to do something, or are you just paying lip service? We have actually explained to the subcommittee on poverty alleviation that there will be a review in a year's time. But the point is, how are you going to help these needy families? Are you going to conduct a special study focusing on these families with special needs? Well, we will collect information. We would try to understand from people who cannot really benefit from the scheme. We'll look at the cases, and once we have the experience and the information, we'll look at the evidence, and the decision will be evidence-based. Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan, more than 10 years ago, on behalf of the CTU, we asked the FS to consider a negative taxation system for the needy and also or a living allowance scheme. Well, it's better late than never. This liver scheme has many loopholes. Dr. Fernando Cheung has referred to the first one. Why don't you combine the two or cancel the two working hours requirement, 144 and 192. Just go for 144. 144 is full-time work. It's 35 hours per week. If we look at the definition of full-time work of the ILO, 35 hours is full-time work. If it's 144, administratively, it's much more straightforward. Why do you go for 192 hours? For this week, for this month, it may be 200 hours, and the next month, 180 hours. It's a lot of trouble for the applicant and for you. You just want to help. If the income and asset limits are met, why can't you simplify the procedure? Let's just have one line, one income requirement. And then $1,000 of basic allowance will be granted, and then every child $800, so that you don't have to give $800 to some, $600 to some others. So let's have one criterion. That's the first loophole that I want to talk about. Second, we stated right from the beginning that you should look at the disposable income. That is, you say you have to consider rent, especially those living in private housing. They may earn high income, $15,000 to $18,000. If you take into account rent paid, that's $6,000 to $7,000, and they would be left with $10,000. It would just be the same as those earning $12,000 or $13,000 and living in public housing estates. So we have to look at these families with difficulties living in private housing. So we would like you to consider the disposable income. Lastly, on the question of the time required, 18 months. We want to get it done, to get it implemented ASAP. You have some problems. You have to rent an office, and you have to get the IT system prepared. How much time do you need to get the IT system ready? You can shorten the lead time if you can get both things done very soon. You say you are going to date back the starting time for 6 months from the time you are ready. Now it seems that you would only start on the 1st of May 2016. So you will be dated back to the 1st of December. Why don't you date it back to the 1st of September, the start of the school year, so that people can start to save up to gather the necessary information such as pay slips. First, the difference between $600 and $1,000 is not a loophole, it's in the design. The $400 is a reward for those who work harder, those who work for longer hours. Because some people are working long hours and still they haven't got sufficient to support the family. So we should encourage them to work for longer hours. Everyone gets $600 to start with. So it's not a loophole. We just want to provide an incentive for those people who work harder. Please don't intercept. You should allow time for the secretary to reply. I think very few people work for 144 hours. 6 to 7% of the applicants are expected to get the $1,000. So don't worry. Most people will get $1,000. And also, it's complicated to assess disposable income. Look at the poverty line definition. We look at the median income of families. It's an easy criterion to understand. Why can't you date back to September? Well, it's in the design. We have a cycle of 6 months. So once we start, we will be flexible. We will look back. We date back. If we have to date back for a longer period, it would mean that we have to start later. Well, the pandemocrats have been filibustering in this meeting. That's why we only have this item before us today. We'd like the allowance to be granted to needy families as soon as possible. In the panel, we already told the secretary that it's disappointing that you need another 18 months because that's something that they are expected to get, and the waiting time is so long. why can't you take some measures so that you can grant the allowance earlier for OALA? The Secretary adopted some measures. When the Council approved the funding, the necessary manpower was already available for the preparation. You said so at the time. And also in assessing the applications, please be as generous as possible. If the procedure is not as complicated, I remember that for some of the applicants, you would only assess the eligibility after a year. This will shorten the time needed for processing. I think only the needy families would come forward to claim the allowance, not those with no needs. So you should do more to shorten the preparation time. I don't want to speak for too long, lest I would hold up the other items on the agenda. So please consider this. One more point. You should have a review every year to see if the amount of the allowance should go up, because inflation is very serious. Secretary, Mr. Leung, we would fight for the shortest possible lead time. We hope that we will be able to go for 15 months. We hope to sign the lease for the office next Monday. OLA is a different case, because these applicants were receiving the OAA, and the information was already in the computer system. So we said we would trust them that they would be eligible. But here, these applicants are starting from scratch. They are not on CSSA. They are not living in public housing estates. So we don't know whether they are eligible. We cannot just give the allowance, because if we do that, we will be taken to task by audit, and we will be asked to come back to explain. There are two transitional measures. The CE has invited the CCF to look at the textbook subsidy. That would benefit 138,000 students, and more than 100,000 families will be benefited, whether they are on CSSA or not. Well, those on CSSA will not get it first. And we're also going to benefit another tens of thousands of families who are so-called and nothing. So, and then we also date back for 6 months. So the overall effect of the preparation period will not be serious. Our colleagues have been working very hard. Although the application for funding has not been approved, we have been doing some work. So we would be pressing ahead in full steam once the approval is given. Mr. Frederick Fung, I want to make 3 points, and then I have a few questions. First of all, I don't agree with Mr. Leung Li-Yan. I don't agree with Mr. Leung Chi-Chung that we are responsible for the delay. The agenda is set by the government. Well, they said this is important, this item is important, but it refused to change the order of the items on the agenda. And our subcommittee on poverty alleviation has talked about these things for a long time. We're not just talking about low-income working family. It's also about assistance for children. In the Commission on Poverty study on poverty, there are a number of families with particular difficulties, such as families with elderly and children, or persons with disability or elderly members. Why don't you include families or cover families with PWDs, the elderly, and persons with chronic illnesses. If you cover these three groups, then the most families in poverty will be covered. And second, I agree with Mr. Leung Chi-Chung that there should be a retrospective effect. Let's say we pass this today, it's 6 months behind time, and the government needs 18 months. Why can't you date back the commencement month, the commencement date, to the month that would have been the case if there has not been any delay for 6 months? Secretary, as I've said, there is the financial discipline of the government that we need to comply with. We would date back 6 months from the time of the receipt of the applications, and there are interim measures to help families in poverty. We have given thought to all these issues. I'm sorry that at this point we cannot date back any further. Mr. Frederick Fung. Next, Mr. Chung Kok Chu. Thank you, Chairman. It's better late than never. I support this proposal of liver. But there are a couple of questions that I would like to raise. The government should be more open to suggestions from this council and from people in the community. Apart from families with children, what about families with chronically ill persons and the elderly and persons with disabilities? We are providing some help to persons with disabilities and also to the elderly, but nothing to families with chronically ill persons. And chronically ill persons can be a serious burden for these families. You are still saying no today. I think you should try to find other ways to help persons with chronic diseases. For example, you should try to ask CCF to provide some assistance, and then you will see how happy they are, and then after a year you conduct a review. You should cover them. You can easily cover them in this liver scheme. And also, this paper is of course outdated. It was prepared last year. You were talking about a lead time of 15 months. Now it's 15 to 18 months. Let's say we give you 3 more months. So it's April or July next year that we see the scheme up and running. Please come back at the end of this year to the relevant subcommittee and report the progress. If it's possible to move faster, please don't wait until April or July. It's easy for civil servants to say that I just take a few more months to work it out, but it's really urgent for the recipients. So at the end of this year, please come back to report progress and expedite it if possible. And the third question is the interim or transitional arrangements. There are no signs at present on who would get assistance and how much will be given. What is your estimated timetable when these families will get some assistance? Don't tell us that it's January next year, because it would just mean that for those who are going to leave, there are only a few months left. Please tell us when the interim measures can be implemented. First, I can promise I will come back to report progress to the relevant subcommittee, and whenever we can start it earlier, we will do so. We'll announce the scheme to be implemented as soon as it's possible to commence. As for persons with chronic diseases, there was a forum of this session at the subcommittee. We asked the CCF to look at ways and means to help them, and if possible to regularize the assistance, so there will be follow-up work, in-depth follow-up work. Actually, one of the measures has been implemented. We are receiving applications and we are giving out the assistance. We are talking about grassroots families. They will get something from 4,000 to 13,000. And for the textbook subsidy, I'm going to talk to Dr. Lo Chi Kong, the chairman of the committee, and we need to get the approval of the commission. And we'll set a sufficient amount, and then we will be able to help more than 100,000 families with children. And then we are also going to date back the leave-out period for 6 months.
Any follow-up? No, Ms. Chen Yunhan. Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure this can be passed tonight, but we are already several months late. I want to share my feeling. Last year's policy address, this was announced, and now we already see another policy address as this still has not been implemented. I hope the government would really ponder on this. I remember at a meeting I asked Dr. Lo Chi Kong, I asked him what about the transitional period. It takes such a long time for this to be set up. I think the government should really think about it. Just now the secretary told us that, well, he has to insist on the 15 to 18 months. I have doubt about that. When the government first talked to LegCo, the situation was different. There were consultation on hours, etc. At that time, you already had some plans in mind. But how come you still insist on that number of months? I still cannot understand. Now it's been delayed for some months. How come you are still insisting on 16 months? Is it the rigidity of the civil servants? Now you've set it at 18 months, so it will always be 18 months. Chairman, we've been talking about this for a long time. It's not something new today. After so many months, well, actually we asked a lot of questions. At that time, we thought that it was too long a time. And now you so insist on 18 months. I really don't understand why. Well, you can tell me that you haven't found an office yet. Well, I hope you can sign the lease tonight. No, you cannot. I really want to know why you are still insisting on so many months. Is it not bureaucracy? We have been talking about this for a long time. How come the government is so unprepared? What has gone wrong? Is it the government properties agency or what? Which department's fault is it? Why do you still need 15 to 18 months? Secretary, I asked Ms. Lau, our senior principal EO, to explain to you why. We have already compressed the time significantly. Well, this didn't happen yesterday. We have been talking about this for a long time. Well, Ms. Chen, you have to understand, if we don't get a green light from the LegCo, we cannot do anything. For example, tendering. We have already jumped some guns. You need 18 months for tendering? No, it's not just about tendering, Ms. Lau. Chairman, in the past few months, we have already established 9 posts with limited resources. We have been doing preparatory work. However, if we haven't got funding approved, then we cannot sign the rental lease. And after signing the lease, we will design the office. So our colleagues have already been very helpful. Different departments have been working hard towards this goal, but without the funding, we cannot sign the lease, then we cannot rent the office, and we cannot draw the layout plan, and we cannot start the fitting out works. In February, it's impossible to find workers for fitting out works. I really query the government. Now you are renting a place. I'm sure there are many places for rent. And you also need to do the fitting out works. So if you need to find an office, if you need to do the fitting out works, I don't think 15 to 18 months would suffice. Well, we will compress the time. The fitting out works would be divided into 2 stages. We will do the first stage as soon as possible. But we need the funding before we buy the IT system and before we design the relevant program. So all these will take time. We will be working very hard. And we hope that by the middle of this year, we can move into the new office. And some of the IT facilities would then be tested. Well, we will try our best, but it will take at least 10 months for the whole office to be up and running. And after we have an office, our staff can start working, and then we will need to test the systems. Well, maybe you can provide the answer to Ms. Chen in writing, or Ms. Chen, you can press the button several more times. Mr. Chen Chi-Chen. Thank you, Chairman. No matter whether it's legislators or members of the public, it's very difficult for us to understand why do we still have to wait for 18 months. In the policy address, it already says 1.5 years. Okay, you said no office, no refurbishment, so you cannot do anything. I find it hard to understand. If there are 4 walls, you just put a desk there and you can start working. And tendering is easy. Let me talk about the whole project or scheme. Well, we are doubtful about the 192 and 144. That's a difference of 40. Well, for the 144, you should give them $1,000. If you want to encourage them, saying that, oh, they're working for such long hours, then if it's 192, then you can add some more money. Of course, the secretary won't accept that, and that will affect your whole budget. So I think we have very different views. Now, you have already earmarked this amount. The government and the LegCo supports this proposal, that is helping the low-income working families. And you are talking about a cycle of half a year. So after vetting, can you first give them a special allowance, which is like half a year's allowance or a year's allowance? So after granting the approval, you give them this lump sum allowance, and then you adopt a half-year cycle. If you agree to this, why can't you do it in a special manner? And just now, the government officials, when they answered Ms. Chen, well, you talked about the preparatory work. So this has been formulated for a long time. So how come we still need 1.5 years? Mr. Chen, you have to understand that we are talking about 200,000 families who will be applying. We cannot do things with just one desk. We need a huge team, and we are talking about $3 billion. We are distributing hundreds of millions of dollars per month. In the past 7 months, we have never stopped working. Mrs. Lau and her 9 colleagues have been working very hard. And on Monday, we will have to follow up on the lease. Yes, you have to set up the system, but how about giving money to people? Well, in the past, I remember when $6,000 were distributed to the public, it was fast. Well, it took a very long time. It didn't take just 2 days. I'm not asking you to do it within 2 days. We are not dragging our feet, Mr. Chen. You have to understand this. The government wants to do this. We want to give the allowance to the needy families as soon as possible. We have 2 provisional measures for the and have-nots. And also there will be textbook allowance. We are talking about 138,000 students from non-CSSA families. Then we need to fill a lot of holes. Well, without interrupting your half-year cycle, how about giving them a lump sum allowance after approval? Well, we have been very lenient already. We are counting 6 months back. We are trying our best to help the needy families. However, there are still some limitations in terms of policy. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, Secretary, when the government wants to do something, it will be done. If there is a will, there is a way. Well, if you really want to do it, it can definitely be done. You are blaming us for filibustering, but I think it's quite incredible for you to take 18 months to do this. If it's for Mr. Li Ka-shing to do business, this will never happen. Well, you always criticize us for filibustering. That's why the people are not getting their allowance. But you can do your job. I think C.Y. Leung has been breaking a lot of rules. If he, well, maybe you can call him today. You say, CE, well, please don't scold me, but they're saying that 18 months are too long. I'm sure he can make it faster. If the government wants to do something, it can definitely be done. You set the rules. I don't think what you said was reasonable. I can guarantee that. And John Tsang suddenly forked out $22 billion for housing programs. It's just like slapping C.Y. Leung on the face. So if you are going to do it, just do it, but don't pass the buck to us. If you want to be fast, you can do it. John Tsang once said that the $6,000 handout was the wrong decision. Even the pro-establishment camp was angry. So I hope John Tsang can have another breakfast meeting with the pro-establishment camp so that the liver can be given to the needy families as soon as possible. You know that we have to approve this today so that we can also pass the civil servants' pay rise, because you want to do that before April. But you have to face the reality. You have to explain to us what your difficulties are. If you can't think of any, I can think of some for you. Maybe you can tell us that the IT system won't be ready in time. But in the business sector, if you pay more, you can get it done as fast as you like. And I would also like to explain to the civil service. When I was arrested by the police, the policeman would try to lobby me, please don't filibuster anymore, we want a pay rise. For civil servants, okay, but we are not filibustering today. Okay, we'll pay. But there's another injustice. Senior civil servants will get 3% pay rise, but for those at the middle and lower ranks, they get no pay rise. Well, this is the next item. Please focus on this item. Well, we are all making a speech here. Okay, maybe I'll back down today and grant the approval. But how about different pay rise for different ranks? Why is that? Well, for the middle and lower ranks, if there's no pay increase, I don't think that's right. So, filibuster, what do you think? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, I would like to remind you again, we are not on the topic of civil service pay increase. Please focus on this item. I have been very accommodating already. I have the responsibility to remind you to be focused. Okay, if we approve the pay rise, then you can get a new pay on the 1st of April. But I want to say that it's totally wrong that only senior civil servants would get a pay rise. Don't cheat the civil servants. Happy New Year, civil servants. Do you think it is right for civil servants in middle and low salary bands, they get no pay rise? Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, just now other members talked about 15 months, 18 months, and they talk about the scope, for example, the chronic patients, elderly, etc. I really regret about all this, but I do not want to repeat the questions. I want the Secretary to pay attention to something. Last time about traffic allowance, there was a lesson to be learned, and I hope that the mistake will not be repeated, because last time there was not enough promotion on the traffic expense allowance, and many members of the public didn't even know there was such an allowance. So I hope that this time around the publicity can be done in a better manner. And also about the forms. Our colleagues have become civil servants. They had to fill out the forms for the applicants. If you do not simplify the forms, you will again bring us trouble, because our office is closer to the applicants than your office. So please don't make it so complicated. Make the forms as simple as possible, and do not ask applicants to prove this or prove that, because they have to repeatedly go to your office to produce documents. Please make the formalities as simple as possible. I hope you have learned a lesson from the traffic expenses allowance. Yes, thank you, Mr. Leung. We will pay attention to that. Well, this time around we have enough time. If we can really do it within 15 months, then we will have enough time for publicity. And we have been asking people to store their payment slips properly. And also for the forms, yes, I agree with you. It should be user-friendly. But we do need the basic information. We have to check the information. Of course, we do not want to bring troubles to the applicants. So when it comes to designing the forms, we will be very careful. Last time, for the traffic expense allowance, you also said that. So this time around, please really simplify the forms. Last time, remember the form was of so many pages. And about payment slips, well, it's easier for the employees who are paid on a monthly basis. But how about those who are paid on a daily basis? They may not have proper payment slips. There will definitely be problems. Maybe some exemptions should be granted so that these employees can be convenienced. Well, for the traffic expenses allowance, well, the form was thick because it contained a lot of information for the applicants. But now we find that it might be confusing. So this time around, we will make it much simpler. For the employees who do not have pay slips, we will just ask them to make declarations. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions from members? If members have no further questions on these two papers, I will now put these two papers to vote. They are FCR 2014-15, 39. Well, we'll first vote on paper 39 first. For those who are in favor of the proposals contained in FCR 39, please raise their hands. For those who object, please raise their hands. I think the majority of the members are in favor of the proposal. I declare the proposal passed. The second paper is FCR 2014-15-48. Is on the development of information technology system. For those in favor of the proposal set out in paper FCR 2014-15-48, please raise their hands. For those who object, please raise their hands. I think the majority of the members are in favor of the proposal.
Item 4, paper FCR bracket 2014-15-47. This item invites members to approve with effect from the 1st of April 2014 an increase in pay of civil servants and relevant recommendation, and the total financial implications amounts to 8,912 million, and the civil servants and the electrical were consulted in 2014, and in order to address the issues, we have the following representatives from the government: Mr. Paul Tang, Secretary for Civil Service; Mr. Raymond Wong, Permanent Secretary for Civil Service; Ms. Mei Chen Wing-Chiu, Deputy Secretary for the Civil Service, as well as Ms. Winnie Choi, Principal Assistant Secretary for the Civil Service. Let's invite the head of the government civil service union, Mr. Poon, to outline the paper with us. And on the 23rd of June 2014, we discussed the civil service pay adjustment, and in general, members do not object to the civil service pay adjustment. And when considering the pay adjustment, the comments from different grades weren't considered, and members were concerned of the pay adjustment for the lower salary bands, for the middle and lower salary bands, and the 4.71% proposed is not able to catch up with the 5.1 increase in the CPA 1 index in 2014. It would be detrimental to staff morale, and the CE and Council will, when making a decision, they have to consider all the relevant factors under the pay adjustment mechanism, and the relevant decisions must ensure that the civil service pay is comparable to the private sector, which is one of the policy objectives. Mr. Wong Kwok-heng, 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I don't need 5 minutes. Of course, I will support with this proposal, but I'd like the Secretary to clarify on several points. Kwok Wai-keung asked a question earlier, and the first one is, after this proposal is approved today, will the civil servants enjoy a pay rise before Chinese New Year? And second, for subvented organizations, how many staff are we talking about? And will they certainly enjoy the pay rise before Chinese New Year? Would they not receive the pay rise before Chinese New Year? And will the Secretary urge the subvented bodies to help their employees enjoy a pay rise before Chinese New Year? So that's my question. Secretary, please. First, the simple answer is if this is approved today, by the end of January, we can disseminate the revised salary. And for subvented bodies, upon approval at LegCo today, we have to provide the relevant information to the different organizations later. We might not be able to reflect the new salaries for February. And through other bureaus, we would urge the subvented bodies to do the adjustments as soon as possible. Chairman, with the updated, up-to-date IT technologies available today, since we have the statistics already, that's why I said the government should urge these subvented bodies. So, for example, LegCo members are also subvented staff, so they don't have to wait until New Year before they can receive adjusted salaries. So is this possible, Secretary? The Treasury has to wait for certain information. The speed at which the adjusted salaries can be disseminated really depends on the subvented bodies themselves. Can the subvented bodies pay for the salaries out of their own pocket or their own reserves? They don't have to wait for funding from the Treasury. They can disseminate salaries out of their own reserves. It is possible. Through the Bureau, we will remind these subvented bodies to speed up. Next, Dr. Fernando Chang. We certainly agree to the civil service pay adjustment so that they can catch up with inflation. Right now, for the directorate and upper salary band, the increase is 5.96%, and for civil servants in the middle and lower salary bands, the percentage is 4.71%. So we are very disappointed at this very unfair scenario. And after the salary adjustment, the gap between the upper and the middle and lower bands will further widen. Plato once said that the ratio between senior and junior government staff shouldn't exceed 5:1, and the Prime Minister of UK mentioned that the difference between the maximum band and the minimum band should not exceed 20 times. Right now, our ratio is at 22.6 times between the top and the lowest points, and after the adjustment, the ratio will further widen to 23.6 times. So we are actually widening the poverty gap. So this is a very unsatisfactory adjustment. But that said, we still have to support the adjustment, or else the civil servants won't even adjust this adjustment. I'm concerned with the situation at many subvented bodies, and under the lump sum mechanism, I doubt whether all the extra pool of salary would go into the hands of the staff. Some of them might exploit this extra pool of money, and the adjustment will date back to the 1st of April last year. For staff who leave the government during this period, could they could they enjoy a backdated adjustment? So in terms of figures, I'd like to make some clarifications. And during the 2013 adjustment, the ratio of adjustment for the upper salary band is the lowest. and for the overall salary adjustments for the middle and lower bands were 35.38%, which is higher than the upper band at 31.56%. You are benefiting the upper band while compromising the middle and lower bands, and the body's promised that all the salary adjustments will solely go into the hands of the employees. If there are any problems, they have to explain to the Social Welfare Department. For the back payment arrangement, that is, if certain civil servants leave the government during this period, if subvented bodies they retain this this sum of money, what are you going to do with them? Subvented bodies are not controlled by the government's salary arrangements. So this is their own decision at the end. So at the end, so that means you will give them the money, but whether or not the money will be given to the staff is the decision of the subvented bodies themselves, right? So if so, we are concerned that some bodies will try to retain part of the money. They might, of course, we hope that all civil servants can enjoy a pay rise. But it might be unfair for some civil servants if the pay is, if the adjustment is afforded by average, and as I mentioned, the subvented bodies promise to the SWD that the funds given will be spent on the employees. If this is not the case, the employees might complain to the SWD. So that means the bodies can allocate the funds equally to the employees, right? That's not the case as far as we know. The funds are given, allocated for government subvented services only. Next, Ms. Priscilla Leung. I've been expecting the discussion for the civil service pay adjustment a long time ago, and we received a letter from the government staff union that they felt frustrated by the constant filibustering at the Legislative Council. And the proposal might have certain room for improvement. But we are looking at pay adjustment in the private sector as well, so we understand the difficulties. We won't ask a lot of questions tonight. So in order for the proposal to be approved today, and hopefully the civil servants can enjoy a rise before Chinese New Year. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chairman. For the adjustment for the upper salary band, the adjustment is 5.96% and 4.71% for the middle and lower salary band, so everyone can enjoy a rise. Mr. Leung Kok Hong didn't seem to grasp the concept really well, and he thought he said the lower salary bands would not enjoy any pay rise. And for the annual pay trend survey, and there will be another review every 6 years. In comparison with the private sector, these are two entirely different studies. So perhaps Mr. Leung Kok Hong should find out more before you raise your views. And the civil service has been waiting for the pay adjustment, and they understand that the opposition is filibustering, and at the same time they were eagerly anticipating the pay adjustment, which had been scheduled on the 1st of April 2014, and now we are at in January. This has dragged on for more than half a year. We hope the relevant arrangements can go smoothly, and the adjustment can be reflected in February. And in the annual pay trend survey, there have been some controversies, mainly on the sampling method. And will the Civil Service Bureau introduce improvements to the sampling methodology? And will the CSP also step up enhancement within different grades and ranks in order to enhance the smooth operation of future pay trend surveys? After the survey every year, the pay trend survey committee will sit down and discuss what can be improved next year. And work has been ongoing. Any follow-up? Mr. Yip Kin Yun, Chairman. As a representative of the education sector, we are very concerned with the civil service pay adjustment because because it's related to teachers and staff of aided schools. We hope the government can rearrange the order of the agenda items. We hope the government can understand the public's needs and tackle the easier items first, and they should reorder the order of the items in order to pass the civil service pay adjustment at a much earlier date. However, unfortunately, we didn't receive any response from the government, and last year the teachers union conducted a petition and in the hope of passing this agenda item as soon as possible. And I'm very happy to see that we have finally reached this item today. We would like to thank Mr. Paul Tang. He responded to my letter, and the letter mentioned contract staff who have left, staff in subvented bodies. Apart from the written reply, can Mr. Paul Tang let the entire public know right now that for staff who have left, or contractual staff or staff in subvented bodies, would they be affected? I think he already addressed it, so perhaps you can repeat yourself. I think you would like to ask about contractual staff, right? For contractual positions, their salary adjustments are not linked with this exercise, and their pay rises are adjusted, are decided by their departments. We have reminded these departments last year to conduct the pay adjustment. The subvented bodies will be in charge of deciding the pay adjustments. Are these subvented bodies required to disseminate the entirety of the funds to their staff? The Secretary has already answered Dr. Fernando Cheng's question on the arrangement of pay adjustment in subvented bodies. For welfare bodies, in the last 2 years, the Social Welfare Department had reached some kind of consensus with these subvented bodies. There were guidelines, and under the guidelines, if subvented bodies receive additional funds due to the civil service pay adjustment, the welfare bodies have to adjust the pay of their staff according to the pay adjustment of the civil service. And the alternative is that all of the funds received must be disseminated to their staff, and they have to notify their staff of their decision. And and the relevant arrangement is listed in the SWD's best practice guidelines. And I believe the subvented bodies and welfare bodies would adhere to such guidelines. Mr. Tam Yu Chung, I'd like to tell you how we feel at this very moment. During this 4-hour meeting, the DAB did not speak a lot because we didn't want to compromise the progress of the meeting. We only have about 10 minutes left. And the delay of over half a year for civil service pay adjustment, I have something to say to the civil servants. Many of them are watching the TV right now at this moment. They are expecting this proposal to pass tonight. I think we owe the civil servants, and I think everyone is very clear what the reason is for the delay. A lot of members were filibustering. They are unhappy towards the Hong Kong government and CY Leung, and as such, we have to sacrifice other items on the agenda. And the next pay adjustment exercise will arrive very soon. I hope there won't be any repeat of this situation. Hopefully, the pay adjustment can be implemented before Chinese New Year. And hopefully everyone can have a happy New Year. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I have read the letter a few times by the government staff union, from Mr. Sun of the union, from the GEA, and they voiced how they felt since the Executive Council passed the motion. They have been waiting to pocket this money. They have been waiting for the pay adjustment, but up to this day they are still waiting. So hopefully a few minutes later their dreams will come true. They also mentioned that because of the filibustering, they were not able to receive the money they deserve to have a happy Christmas or New Year. So hopefully before Chinese New Year they will receive the money they deserve. Today their dreams will come true. So I'd like to take this chance to wish all civil servants, I'd like to thank them for their efforts in the past year, and in the coming public holiday, hopefully they can have a good rest. They have devoted themselves to the Hong Kong public, and we truly appreciate their efforts, and hopefully they will continue to serve the Hong Kong public.
I wish them a very good 2015. Mr. Chen Chi-chin. Well, the civil servants deserve the pay rise. It's not a dream, but the delay must be the fault of CY Leung. He refused to change the order of the items on the agenda. This week I received some inquiries from the civil servants because they heard that there were rumors that should this fall through before the 1st of April, the whole exercise will be cancelled. But this is not going to happen. But in the future, similar things could happen. I hope the government can clarify this point. If before the new financial year starts and the last salary adjustments does not get the approval, would the pay rise become null and void? Would subvented organizations be affected? A simple answer is no. That won't happen. Mr. Chan, any follow-up question? Does any other member wish to raise further questions? Does any other member wish to raise any further questions? If not, I'll put this item to the vote. Will those in favor FCR 2014-15 number 47, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. I think The majority of members are in favor of the proposal. The proposal is approved. We still have 6 minutes before the end of this session. I'll reserve the other items for next meeting because I'm hungry. Thank you.